this source material you sent, wow, it took me down a rabbit hole. I started with your request for a deep dive on the origins of consciousness and ended up thinking about, well, the survival instincts of amoebas.
It is a fascinating connection, isn't it? This excerpt you shared from what seems to be a neuroscience book makes a compelling argument about how something as complex as consciousness is tied to this very primal drive to survive, this biological value.
So instead of pondering the universe and debating the meaning of life, our brains are more like obsessive housekeepers, making sure we don't run out of snacks and oxygen.
Exactly. It's like that F. Scott Fitzgerald quote, "His was a great sin who first invented consciousness." At first, it seems like consciousness is this burden, but this source argues it's actually the opposite. Consciousness is an incredible advantage. It's just that its roots are surprisingly practical.
Interesting.
Our brains evolved to solve the problem of keeping these messy, demanding bonies alive, a process called homeostasis. And all those grand thoughts, all the anxieties and joys, even that existential dread you might feel at 3 a.m. Those are all byproducts of that basic drive to survive and maintain balance.
So, let's unpack this a bit. You use the term biological value, and I think it's important to clarify that right off the bat. What exactly does that mean in this context?
You're right. That's key to understanding this whole concept. In the simplest terms, biological value is the drive inherent in all living things to survive and thrive. It's about seeking out what's beneficial for survival, like food and safety, and avoiding what's harmful.
So even a single-celled organism has this biological value. Even without a complex brain like ours.
Wow. Think of an amoeba, no brain to speak of. But it still senses its environment, responds to threats, and prioritizes getting energy. It's making decisions, in a sense, about what's important for its survival, all without a single conscious thought.
You know that feeling when your stomach is growling and suddenly you can't focus on anything else? That's your brain in all its complexity basically saying, hey, remember that whole staying alive thing? Yeah, we need fuel for that. It's like our inner amoeba taking the wheel.
That's a perfect example. And this basic drive to survive, this biological value present even in the simplest organisms, underpins everything.
Wow.
It's the foundation upon which our more complex value judgments are built. Think about what we find pleasurable: food, sex, social connection. They all tie back to those basic survival needs, hardwired into us over millennia.
It's like we're running on ancient software, even as we try to upgrade to the latest version with all the bells and whistles of human consciousness.
A very apt analogy. And while other organisms largely stick to basic survival, humans have taken biological value to another level.
Which is? Don't leave me hanging.
We don't just value survival, we value the quality of that survival. We've evolved to seek out well-being, meaning, purpose. It's not just about staying alive. We crave comfort, connection, meaning. Our brains are hardwired to seek out those things that make life worth living. And that's where things get really interesting.
So we're striving for this quality of life, this well-being that goes beyond just the bare necessities of survival. How does the source material explain that leap? Does it involve, say, a bigger brain, more neurons firing?
Well, you're on the right track with neurons. This excerpt actually delves into the fascinating world of neurons and how they work. And while I could go on and on about the intricacies of their electrical signaling, what's truly mind-blowing for you, for all of us really, is what they do.
All right, give me the mind-blowing neuron lowdown.
Neurons, despite being these tiny little cells, create a kind of internal map inside your brain. Imagine a miniature version of yourself, a representation of your body, and the entire world around you being constantly poked and prodded by information. That's what your neurons are up to.
That imagery is a bit out there, but I think I get it. It's like our brains are building this constantly updating simulation of reality based on what our senses are telling us.
Exactly.
Wow.
This inner map, this simulation, is how we experience the world. Everything you see, hear, touch, taste, smell, it all gets routed through this incredible brain-body connection. We don't actually experience the world directly, but through the filter of our neurons.
Whoa. So that whole reality is an illusion thing, maybe it's not so far-fetched after all.
It really makes you question how much of what we perceive is truly objective and how much is shaped by this internal model.
Right. Yeah.
Here's a fact from the source that I think you'll find particularly interesting. Neurons, unlike almost every other cell in your body, don't divide.
Really?
They don't renew themselves.
Wait, really? Why is that significant? I'll admit, I slept through a good portion of high school biology.
Well, think about it this way. Every other cell is constantly being replaced, a fresh slate, so to speak.
Okay.
But your neurons, they're the originals.
Wow.
The same neurons you had as a child, the ones that hold the memories of your first bike ride or the smell of your grandmother's cookies, those are still with you today.
Wow, that is pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah.
It makes your brain seem both incredibly resilient and incredibly fragile at the same time.
Precisely. And it ties back to this idea of biological value. Those neurons, as unchanging as they are, hold the blueprint for keeping you alive and making you you.
Okay, so we've got this incredible, intricate network of neurons creating a map of the world inside our brains.
Right.
But how do we actually feel and experience that world? That's where feelings come in, right? It seems like feelings would have to be more than just neurons firing, right?
Well, on a fundamental level, yes, feelings do involve neurons firing. But what's interesting is how the source material links our feelings back to this idea of biological value.
Okay.
It argues that feelings from simple pleasure and pain to those complex emotions we humans are so good at generating
Right.
are essentially your body's report card. They tell us how we're doing in terms of that homeostatic balance we were discussing earlier.
So when I'm stressed out about a deadline and my stomach is doing backflips, that's my body saying, hey, something's off here. This whole impending deadline situation is messing with our homeostasis.
Exactly. Our bodies are in a constant dance,
Right.
reacting to both internal and external changes. And our feelings are how we make sense of those changes. Think about it. We're hardwired to seek out pleasure and avoid pain.
Right.
Why?
Yeah.
Because that's evolution's way of keeping us alive.
Right.
Pleasure, on a very basic level, often signals that we're doing something beneficial for our survival.
Okay.
Eating when we're hungry, finding shelter when we're cold.
Right.
Pain, on the other hand, tells us to stop, to reevaluate, because whatever we're doing might be harmful.
So it's like our brains are wired with a giant carrot and stick.
Yeah.
Except the carrot is a feeling of well-being and the stick is, well, a whole lot of unpleasantness.
That's a great way to put it. And this brings us to a fascinating example from the source material that really highlights this connection between even simple organisms, biological value, and social behavior.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of C. elegans?
C. elegans. Can't say that I have. Is it like a new superfood? Should I be adding it to my smoothies?
Not quite a superfood, though they are pretty incredible in their own right.
Okay.
C. elegans are these tiny, transparent worms.
Okay.
And believe it or not, they have a lot to teach us about the origins of social behavior.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tiny worms, you say. What makes them so special?
Well, for one, they only have 302 neurons.
Wow.
That's a tiny fraction of the neurons we humans have.
Right.
And yet, even with these seemingly simple brains, they display complex social behaviors. For example, when food is scarce, C. elegans will actually gather together and feed in groups.
So even with those tiny brains, they understand there's safety in numbers.
Exactly.
That cooperation can increase the chances of survival.
And this really challenges our assumptions about what intelligence is and where it comes from.
Wow.
Here we have these tiny worms demonstrating social behaviors that we humans, with our vastly more complex brains, might consider intelligent, even strategic.
So we're all just worms on a bigger, more complex wormhole, striving for survival and well-being, each in our own way.
In a sense, yes. And that brings us to the crux of it all.
Okay.
This basic drive for survival, this biological value that we've been discussing, it's not just some abstract concept.
Right.
It underpins everything. Our complex social structures, from the way we organize our societies to the decisions we make every single day, they all trace back to this fundamental drive to survive and thrive.
Right.
The need to secure resources, connect with others, to find meaning and purpose in a world that can often feel chaotic and unpredictable. These drives shape our world in ways we rarely stop to consider.
It's pretty profound when you think about it that way. This whole journey through the source material has really shifted my perspective.
Yeah.
It's almost like we're all on autopilot, driven by these ancient forces that have been shaping life for millennia. Does that mean free will is just an illusion? Are we all just slaves to our biochemistry?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
And it's one that philosophers have been grappling with for centuries. But here's the thing, and this is where understanding these biological roots can be truly empowering. It doesn't have to negate free will.
Okay.
Instead, it illuminates the playing field on which our choices are made.
Yeah, okay.
By understanding these deep-seated drives, we can start to make more conscious choices that align with our values.
Right.
We can't escape our biology, but we can learn to work with it to become more self-aware, more compassionate, more intentional in our actions.
So it's not a question of nature versus nurture, but rather nature and nurture. We're shaped by our biology, but not imprisoned by it.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
By understanding these deeper forces, we gain a new level of agency, a new perspective on what it means to be human in this complex, interconnected world.
Well, there you have it. A deep dive that started with the origins of consciousness and ended with, well, pretty much everything.
Right, from the survival instincts of single-celled organisms to the complexities of human society, it turns out it's all connected.
And maybe, just maybe, this deep dive will inspire you to look at the world with fresh eyes, to appreciate the intricate dance between biology, behavior, and the choices we make every single day.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the profound implications of it all. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.